And everybody's head is very big.
Yeah, you're right. It's funny to think of buying a desktop, but you're right. Makes sense.
I'll tell you, after using a laptop, for the last 20 years or whatever it was, longer, and you get used to the smaller screen, to have the big screen, it's really cool. It's a little hard to move around, but it's really cool.
Simple
Peter,
stuff.
Peter McKeechen, how's things at the yacht club?
Not bad. We've tested our staff 4 times now.
Wow. Well, that's good. That's very proactive.
About 12,000 a whack, but it's worth it.
Yeah, it's worth it. Yeah, compared to having to take corrective actions if something goes wrong.
Yeah.
Let's see. Okay, it's 11 o'clock. Do we have a quorum? Not yet. Count, please. 1, 2, 3, 4. Oh yeah, we do. 5,
George.
6.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay, we do. Thank you. Okay, so I will call the FinCom meeting to order. Permit me to confirm that all persons anticipated on the agenda are present and can hear me. So members, when I call your name, please reply in the affirmative. I'll do it in the order in which I see you. Peter Schaefer,
Aye.
Peter McKeechen,
Aye.
Stephen Morey,
Aye.
Joe Grouse,
Here.
George Harrington.
Here.
Staff, when I call your name, please respond in the affirmative. Brian Turbot
Present.
and Ken Bogrand.
Here.
Thank you. And anticipated speakers on the agenda, please reply in the affirmative. Again, in the order in which I see you. So Tucker Holland,
Here.
Brooke Moore,
Present.
Sully.
Present.
Hi, Libby. Libby, I'll call you in at this point. Libby Gibson.
Present.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. This open meeting of the Finance Committee is being conducted remotely, consistent with Governor Baker's executive order of March 12th, 2020, due to the state of emergency in the Commonwealth due to the outbreak of COVID-19 virus. In order to mitigate the transmission of the virus, we have been advised and directed to suspend public gatherings, and as such, we have suspended the requirement of physical presence for the open meeting law. Further, all members of public bodies are allowed to and encouraged to participate remotely. Ensuring public access does not ensure public participation unless such participation is required by law. This meeting will not feature public comments. For this meeting, the Finance Committee is convening via video conference on the Zoom app as posted on the town's website, identifying how the public may watch. Please note that this meeting is being recorded and that all attendees are participating by video conference. Accordingly, please be aware that other folks may be able to see you and to take care not to screen share your computer. Anything that you broadcast may be captured by the recording. We're now turning to the first item on the agenda. Before we do so, permit me to cover some ground rules for effective and clear conduct of our business and to ensure accurate meeting minutes. I will introduce each speaker on the agenda. After they conclude, please raise your hand if you have any questions or comments that you'd like to provide. And please remember to mute your phone or computer when you're not speaking. And remember to speak clearly in a way that helps Terry generate accurate minutes. For any response, please wait until I yield the floor to you and state your name before speaking. And if you wish to engage in conversation with other members, please do so through me, taking care to identify yourself. And finally, each vote taken in this meeting will be conducted by roll call. Great. Okay, now over to the agenda. Can I please have a motion? Oh, and this meeting is being both broadcast and recorded. Okay, may I please have a motion to approve the agenda?
So made.
A second?
Second.
Thank you. By roll call, Peter Schaefer,
Yes.
Peter McKeechen,
Yes.
Stephen Morey,
Yes.
Joe Grouse,
Yes.
George Harrington,
Yes.
Jill Veith.
Yes.
Thank you. Denise, yes. So thank you for that. As I said, there'll be no public comment. May I have, are there any questions or changes to the minutes that Ali sent to us? Seeing nobody raising their hand, may I have a motion to approve?
So
Motion
moved.
to approve.
Second,
Second.
Aye.
thank you. And here we go again. Peter Schaefer,
Yes.
Peter McKeehan,
Yes.
Joe Grouse,
Yep.
Stephen Morey,
Yes.
George Harrington,
Yes.
Jill Veith.
Yes.
Denise Cronow, yes. Thank you very much. Okay, now with that, we are now going to get an update from the Affordable Housing Trust relative to Article 37 from the 2019 annual town meeting and the Neighborhood First program. So Sully, I will turn it over to you, and then you can turn it over to your colleagues. Sully, you're on mute. There you go.
Thank you very much. Thanks for the opportunity to come to your meeting and kind of give you an update. Denise, I do appreciate that you joined the entirety of our board meeting last week to kind of catch up in live time. I will touch base kind of on the high level of some of the items that Tucker shared with you. As of this time, we have a RFP prepared and finalizing town council and some work with Brian at staff. We'll get ready to go out in the upcoming weeks for the single home property purchase opportunities in the Neighborhood First. We recently completed a purchase of 2 properties on Orange Street, 135 and 137, that I think some of you are familiar with. We'll be working towards the RFP for development on that in upcoming months. I think that sort of covers the high level on Neighborhood First. Tucker, I'll open to you to touch base on following up some of the documentation that you shared with everyone. There's a lot of other things going on, like, forgive me, a lot of other things going on with Affordable Housing Trust Fund, but those are specifically related to Neighborhood First. Tucker?
Thank you, Brian. Madam Chair and committee, thank you for the opportunity, as Brian said, to join you all today, give you an update on what we've been working on relative to Neighborhood First. Everyone will recall that at the annual town meeting last year, Article 37 passed, as well as the accompanying ballot measure. Immediately upon the passage of those items, the trust recognized the weight of responsibility of up to $20 million of taxpayer money. And so they went about establishing an advisory committee. We received a tremendous amount of interest in being a part of that committee from both year-round and seasonal folks. We're fortunate to have some good resident expertise in the housing area. Our committee, or the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee, was chaired by Doug Abbey, a seasonal resident, along with, as co-chair, Peter Hoey. So that group immediately set about its work in coming up with recommended strategies for how to deploy this capital. We also consulted
Tucker, I just lost you. I don't know if anybody else has.
Yes. Yes.
Yes. Thank you. Oh, other people have lost him. Let's give it a minute
Wi-Fi
to see if
failure.
he comes back. Okay, and he's back. And he's just turned into Chris Glowacki on my screen. Joe, do you want to say something while we're waiting for Tucker to
No.
reappear?
No,
Oh, you're just waving at me. Okay.
I was just waving, sorry. Being friendly.
Okay. Brian, Brian or Brooke, do you want to step in while Tucker is on the ether somewhere?
So I'll ask Brooke to step in because since Tucker was talking about the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee, she was a member of the Affordable Housing Trust Fund that sat in on it. So Brooke, could you elaborate on some of the work that was done where Tucker left off?
Sure. So what we did on Neighborhood First is we set about trying to better understand the article as it was written, what was permissible under the argument, under the article, and how to manage what and how to identify the goals of the article, then to determine strategies for implementing those goals. And so we found in the article two purposes for the borrowing of the money. One was to keep us in safe harbor as we work our way toward reaching the 10% subsidized housing inventory goal mandated by the state of Massachusetts, which effectively means we have to create 24 units of shy listed housing per year as we move toward our ultimate goal of 490. And then in addition to that, it was this idea of dispersing shy listed and affordable units around the island. And it turns out those two goals are not necessarily in opposition to one another, but not necessarily achievable with one strategy, largely because the acquisition of individual properties and timing them to achieve a year of safe harbor is would be rather difficult. 24 individual units to go into the open market through an RFP process and acquire a year of safe harbor in that way would likely be unachievable in the time frame we needed to do it, and in addition is the most costly way to disperse the funds. So in trying to balance those objectives, the Neighborhood First Committee came up with 3 strategies for trying to achieve those dual goals of staying in safe harbor and dispersing affordable housing around Nantucket. And I'll turn it back over to Tucker to tell everybody where we ended up.
Sorry about that. I think Brooke was just leading into the 3 strategies that the committee developed. They basically center around the dispersed site purchases and development, which was basically laid out in the original pro forma. It also incorporates buy down of existing year-round rentals as one of the 3 strategies, as well as what we term multiple pocket developments. And that really would be Orange Street would be a prime example of that. I guess I'll talk a little bit about safe harbor, and I apologize not having heard exactly what was said the last few minutes if I'm repeating anything, but as everyone knows, we're presently in a period of safe harbor which runs until June 13th of 2020, and I would say virtually that is assured of remaining as it is. Technically, there are a handful of apartment units Richmond
okay? This is a good job. You sure?
needs to receive COs for
It's about dinosaurs.
within
Okay.
a certain time frame. Is there some background noise there, or
Yeah, Joe has to mute.
Sorry guys, my bad.
no problem. So technically, there are a handful of the apartment units that Richmond has been constructing that still need to receive their COs to see through their certification, but those are expected to be pulled within the next 30 to 45 days, which is well in advance of when the requirement is. We are in good shape with respect to safe harbor until next June. I'm going to talk about 6 Fairgrounds Road for a moment. As everyone will recall, that is a town-sponsored project on roughly 3 acres of town-owned land adjacent to the public safety facility that was bid and awarded and has been held up by some neighbor appeals. The end of the legal road came this spring when the Supreme Judicial Court decided not to hear their case, and therefore that project is now cleared to apply for tax credits, which has always been part of the financing, the planned financing structure for that project. So we understand there is likely a mini round of tax credit financing that will happen this fall. The developer is planning to submit for that. There certainly are no guarantees, but the developer feels that the project would stand to score well in the mini round, presuming they have the same criteria as they have had for previous mini rounds of similar financing. So if 6 Fairgrounds applies, receives the tax credit award, which would come in roughly the December to January timeframe, that in and of itself would initiate a new 2-year period of safe harbor. It would cannibalize some of our existing period, but there is not an opportunity to adjust that timing. It is what it is under the DHCD rules. So in any event, it would be 2 new years and provide us some relief in that regard. So, it's with that in mind that we think about the timing for the development and moving forward with some of these other projects. But what we know, and you all, I believe, one of the documents that you all received was the initial report of the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee. And that report, which was produced toward the end of last year, is really tried to give, as best as possible, a layman's type summary of where we are relative to both the SHI list and safe harbor. So while Richmond, for example, if it were to be built as it was permitted, ultimately that project in and of itself would account for roughly half of the total 10% requirement that Nantucket has. Our requirement, as you all will remember, is 490 units on our SHI list. That will change following the 2020 census, but we won't know until probably late 2021 or maybe early 2022 how that number will change and whether it really will change materially. But in any event, we work with it for now. Richmond will produce ultimately 200 and I believe 44 of those units. So really about 50%. However, any one project can only contribute 2 years maximum of safe harbor under the state regulations. That's just what it is. And if you look at the initial report, there's a chart in there toward the end that illustrates that with the great work that organizations like Habitat and Housing Nantucket do, they aren't necessarily contributing large numbers of units on an annual basis that count toward our SHI list. So we, have a materials need in each of the upcoming years on our way to 10%. If we have a desire to stay in safe harbor. And thus property like Orange Street, where we can work within local zoning, very much in the spirit of the Neighborhood First program. And in fact, not necessarily even have to go to the maximum of what zoning allows, although that's a discussion to be had. We can achieve these blocks of safe harbor efficiently using taxpayer money. We have had some conversations with DHCD, of course, along the way in terms of the different strategies. When the Neighborhood First Advisory Committee produced their information that you all are looking at, we reviewed it, with DHCD, and they had said that in effect, if you have the money and every year you can go back to your town meeting and get $20 million to buy individual homes scattered around the island and add them to your list, I suppose you can do that. Although beyond the economic considerations there, they very much cautioned us about that as a strategy for staying in safe harbor, because one thing goes wrong with any one of the dozen units, let's say, or dozen properties, a better way of saying it, you could end up with a shortfall there. So they very much were in favor, if you will, of the pocket, relatively small pocket developments that is really the principal strategy recommended by the group. There are many other aspects of this that I could talk about, but maybe I will pause. One, I'll give Ken the opportunity to add anything he thinks would be important to add, but then also really open it up for questions.
Thank you, Tucker. Before we turn it over to Ken, I had a couple quick questions.
Yep.
So when we reach safe harbor, do we stay in it until there's a new census and then there's a new inventory of year-round housing, and we have to then calibrate whether we're within the 10%? So for example, if tomorrow we were at 490, are we in safe harbor then until the 2030 census? Well, actually, till we get the results from the 2020 census?
The answer is yes. If we were at 490 tomorrow morning, we would be in safe harbor, if you will, until the new census figure was determined.
Thank you. Ken, are there other questions for Tucker before anybody raising their hand?
Yeah, can I just ask a quick question?
Sure,
It's
Peter.
Were Tobias or Rick on the committee?
No, Tobias and Rick were not formally on the committee.
So the two guys that submitted the article were not on the committee?
Neither of them expressed an interest in serving on the committee.
Okay, thank you.
Joe, you raised your hand?
Yeah, I think Tucker or anybody, Brooke, I was on as they all know, I was the FinCom representative on the committee. I think I made 2/3 of the meetings or so. But I think it would be worth talking a little bit about how, ultimately the committee came up with these proportions of how the money would be spent, where the largest component is pocket development, or in effect, de novo, acquiring land and building new structures as opposed to, I guess what people's popular view of what this article did, which was, buying scattered properties and converting single family homes into rental. Can you add any color into how, I remember the report came out, and certainly I believe it's a more effective way to use the capital, but I'm sure people feel like, well, wait a minute, what happened here? Weren't we just supposed to buy 20 or 30 homes and turn them into rental properties? Can you maybe add a little more color about that? And getting back to the comment on Tobias and Rick, I mean, where are they and the people who thought that that's what we were going to do? Where do they stand on this? How the committees and how the Affordable Housing Trust is going forward?
Brooke, would you like to jump in? Thank you.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that's hard to capture is this balance between what the two goals, right? Because we felt very clearly that the article and the what was written as the Tucker, what's the word I'm looking for? There was a summary of the article written by the sponsors. There's a
Oh, the
phrase for it.
preamble?
The preamble to the article really highlighted safe harbor. And so the committee felt pretty strongly that the impetus for this article in the public sphere was in some way a reaction to unfriendly 40Bs. And in order to address that and the issue of safe harbor, this question of how do you line up 24 units in a calendar year became a critical part of our discussion in Neighborhood First. And so in terms of the allocation of the money, there's no like percentage allocation of how the money is going to be spent. It's the acquisition of property and the ability to create a year of safe harbor on said property was the primary goal in order to meet that goal, which we thought was a critical element of the article, which was remaining in safe harbor and avoiding unfriendly 40Bs. And I think I'm going to follow up on what Tucker said in the conversations we had with DHCD about the likelihood of lining up individual property acquisitions as a strategy for meeting that goal of safe harbor, that it's highly unlikely. And so we were balancing those two goals in terms of how we're spending the money. And our intention is to do both, but we don't see, and that's why we have an RFP out, and we are planning to acquire scattered site or dispersed properties through that element of the program. And we don't see it as likely creating a year of safe harbor in and of itself. So in effect, what DHCD told us is that the article, as it was quote unquote understood in terms of acquiring a dozen or 15 properties and creating 24 units, wasn't really going to be possible through DHCD. So we had to balance those two goals. So I hope that answers your question, Joe. And Tucker, whatever you can add.
Thank you, Tucker. Thank you, Brooke. Over to you, Tucker.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just was going to add, because Joe had talked about, in essence, well, what are the views of Rick and Tobias? So I guess I could shed two lights. One, I think the first time I saw Tobias on the street following the newspaper article about the acquisition of the Orange Street properties, he came up and said, like, fantastic. I completely support this. I'm very excited to see this moving forward. So that's sort of one view. Rick, I don't know precisely where he stands on it. I can gather from the I&M article, he may not be as enthusiastic as Tobias is about the Orange Street property. But I think what is important perhaps to mention is that along the way, we obviously have had a number of public discussions about the strategies, and they have been before the Affordable Housing Trust. They've been before the Select Board. And at one point, there was a discussion before the Select Board where Rick, Mr. Atherton, had expressed some concern, I think, about the direction, for lack of better words. And, I said, I really don't think we're trying to accomplish different things. I think folks want the same thing here. And so Ken and I made a point of reaching out to Rick to say, we'd like to talk to you to just try to understand better what the concern might be. And in the course of that conversation, what came out was whether or not a site had been developed or not was the principal factor in his concern. The idea, I think, he may have interpreted, and I do not mean to speak for him, but he may have interpreted the town council opinion as to, well, you can go buy, a forested piece of land anywhere on the island and clear cut it and develop whatever you want. And, when we heard that what his concern was around whether a parcel had been disturbed or developed or what have you, like it immediately put our minds at rest, because we said, I don't know anyone who's thinking about going, buying property to clear cut it and, create de novo. So we felt, given the orange, and we weren't in a position necessarily at that point to talk about specifics, but we felt that, for example, the Orange Street property, which previously has had homes on it and so forth, and more or less is open field, very much met the definition of what would be acceptable to one person, following that conversation. So I don't know if that color helps or not.
Thank you, Tucker.
Yeah, very much, thanks.
Any other questions? Any raise of hands? And then I will ask Ken, Brooke. Let me jump to Ken, because we've already, Brooke, wait, hold on a second, thanks. Ken, we've had you kind of jumping up and down like a whack-a-mole here. Would you like to? Sorry, we've had you mute, unmute, mute, unmute. If you want to add anything, thank you.
I don't think so. I think Tucker and Brooke have really explained the process very well. I will just again repeat what Tucker said about the meeting that he and I had with Rick, and it was very clear in our discussions with Rick, and I personally repeated to him. I said, let me understand, this is what we're talking about, and that is that if there is a parcel somewhere on the island that has had a home on it before, and the home is now gone, that would fit within your idea of the scope of what could be covered from your thoughts relative to the warrant article that was passed. And he agreed that would fit within. So the Orange Street properties would fit ideally within that structure, because in fact, both of them, as Tucker indicated, had structures on before that were taken down.
Thank you, Ken. Stephen?
I just to remember a different conversation that Rick has had on the same topic, because I think it adds some additional clarity and a different opinion that Rick has shared on this issue. His primary objective, and this was a conversation I had with him roughly a week ago, his primary objective in putting forth this Article 37 at this 2019 town meeting was to see housing dispersed around the island and not to see very dense projects. Now, whether we call them unfriendly 40Bs or not, he was primarily concerned with overburdening a particular neighborhood with housing. And that was, the reason that he and Tobias settled on the name Neighborhood First. Think about the neighborhood. So in his opinion, and what I have heard around town, is this project, which I believe to be the most dense residential project that would be on Nantucket, if it comes to fruition at 24 or at 32 units, in terms of dwellings per square foot of land area. I think this will be the densest project on Nantucket. So in Rick's opinion, and in some of the opinions of others I've spoken to, this isn't in keeping with what the voters assumed the Neighborhood First monies would be used for.
Brooke?
I want to be careful about assuming things, because I've had lots of conversations with voters who fully support the decisions that Neighborhood First have made. And while I 100% respect that two people brought the article to the floor of town meeting, it took the entire town meeting to vote on that and to support it, or those who were there. And I can tell you that many people have said to me that they voted for this article primarily because of safe harbor and with concerns about the cost per unit of buying individual properties. And so I think that while the intentions of what Neighborhood First wrestled with is how do you understand or assume people's intentions beyond the two people who proposed the article. And I think that we stepped back and looked at both legally, what are we permitted to do, and what is feasible to be done around this question of staying in safe harbor in order to manage the disbursement of properties across the island. So it's not, it was not to our minds black and white. It's like most public policy decisions, they do fall within the gray. And so I want to say there's support out there for the direction we're going as well. So, and I have to say, Tobias Glidden made the point of calling me to congratulate us and to tell me how happy he was that we made the acquisition at Orange Street and the plans we have for that property. So even within the two proponents or people who put the article forward, there's some disagreement or, you know, different opinion about how it's being applied. So it's challenging indeed. And as we all know in public policy, we never make everybody happy. So.
Thank you, Brooke. Now, from the FinCom's perspective, hang on a second, Sally, I'll get to you in a second. From the FinCom's perspective, we're obviously quite concerned to take a look at, how is the funds being spent? It is the largest project that's been authorized for a while by the town. And also that isn't, town-led. And secondly, just to get a sense of how all of this is going, it's really not to revote it here at this meeting today. And we very much appreciate the background. So I'll turn it over to Sully, and then I'll say to FinCom, unless there's any more questions or comments, I think we've gotten the background that we need to get. Stephen, do you have something else after Sully?
I do.
Okay, so Sully, please go ahead, and then Stephen, over to you.
I just want to bring two other items that are that haven't been discussed that weigh on us very heavily through this thought process and discussion is becoming competitive on the low end of the marketplace and buying out single family units, thus raising the price point of homes that are affordable to year-round community members that don't qualify for affordable housing is an extreme concern for us, and kind of competing in that level of the marketplace. And also our goal is to provide affordable housing for a major need group in our community from all kind of price point AMI areas, from 60% to 175%. And these are not easy things to achieve without deep subsidy and scale. So there are a lot of goals being balanced in an attempt to try and create solutions for our community in the long term. So I really do appreciate the time here today to share with you all the work that we have done and our goals kind of moving forward and the work we look forward to continuing to do. Thank you.
Thank you, Sally. Stephen and Jill, I'll come to you second after Stephen.
Yeah, so to the point that is rightfully made by Brooke and Sully about the most expeditious use of capital toward, getting new affordable housing units, shy or not, just to get the most units. Certainly new construction and certainly dense developments are the best way to go about that. And I understand, Sully, I believe you're the chair of the Affordable Housing Trust, and your mission certainly is to get more affordable housing to serve that need. But I'm not sure that that's exactly the same as what the intention was of the appropriation of this 20 million. So just to make that point, and then Tucker or Brooke or Sully, if somebody could walk us through or walk me through, if I'm the only one who doesn't understand exactly what the safe harbor path looks like for the next 2 or 3 years, assuming that this project is going to take a few years, right? Let's just focus on what's already in the pipeline. And, I guess we have a little bit less than a year on the safe harbor leash that we have right now. And then we have an additional 2 years coming. or it may, I think you mentioned it may cannibalize some of that 10 months, right? Okay. And then, so if you could just clarify that. And then the last piece would be, what is the total delta between the projects in the pipeline, some reasonable expectation of what might come from Surfside Crossing, and the total of 490 units to reach the current safe 10% target?
Thank you, Stephen. And before somebody jumps in on that, I'll go to Jill, just in case some of our questions are the same and we can answer them all at once. So Jill?
Sure. Thanks, guys, for the update. Yeah, I'm more wanting to know, Tucker, as well, just on the housing bank bill, if you all can update us on that. I'm assuming they're not doing anything, or maybe I've missed the news, but and if there's been any push in that, because I can't remember, Tucker, so forgive me, but to include our covenants on the SHI list. So that ties in to a little bit of what Stephen was asking too.
Sure.
Thank you, Jill. So Tucker, I guess over to you, please.
Oh, thank you. And I'm going to apologize if I forget some of the questions in there, so please remind me. But I'll start. I actually start with the last question from Jill, just because it's quick. In terms of our housing bank, our home rule petition has received a favorable recommendation from the Revenue Committee. There are 5 other municipalities with similar bills to ours that have also received favorable recommendations. Virtually as we speak, our state representative is, along with others, looking to tack our home rule petition on to an economic development bill that is going through the legislature. As well, they are looking at tacking on a piece of enabling legislation. So it would be a statewide version, in effect, of our bill with $1 million threshold, as, let's say, as low as $1 million. We could do exactly what we want to do, that is contained in our original home rule petition under this statewide enabling piece if it were to pass. It's really a big question mark whether the leadership will end up letting any of these things get tacked on to the economic development bill. But that is the vehicle by which the legislation could get passed, at least during the formal session. If those efforts all fail, there has been a coalition of transfer fee for housing advocates who would be working in the informal session to get all of these home rule petitions like ours passed in informal session as a block. And again, it's a very steep hill to climb, but one piece of encouraging news, in effect, is we're not in it alone at this stage, and Boston is in it. So, we've certainly said to Representative Fernandez and Senator Sear, it would be a travesty for Boston to go through and not Nantucket having been first at the party. And I think, they've indicated politically that it wouldn't fly. So if the Boston train is going, we should be on it. So I hope that answers. Jill, you'd also brought up about the covenant program and having those units count on our SHI list. That's not technically part of the home rule petition, but it is definitely something that we have brought up on multiple occasions with our representatives, and Senator Sear has a separate bill that does address that. But I don't think in the, particularly given all that the legislature has had to deal with COVID and so forth, that bill is probably moving anytime in the near future. But to go back to Stephen's questions, so you had it right there, Stephen, in terms of what likely would be our next block of safe harbor in terms of 6 fairgrounds. And then really what we have laid out in just a fairly simple crib sheet to, how might we be thinking about the monies being spent or allocated at this point. We see, something along the lines of, as I mentioned, we need 5 years of safe harbor and possibly more to get to our 10%. Richmond, their pace is not going to be there tomorrow morning. Sort of, what we were talking about before. If the 490 suddenly were on our list, they're going to be 5 years minimum. Would be my estimation based on track record and other factors. There actually is a portion of the land that ultimately will be part of their project, which is subject to a life estate. So, who knows exactly when they would be able to complete that portion of the project. So in any event, we need, let's say, 5 years of safe harbor. We see 2 coming from Six Fairgrounds, 1 coming from the Orange Street situation. And then, as you've seen in the little crib sheet, perhaps there's a similar type of situation to Orange Street that provides another year. And then perhaps collectively between the other 2 strategies, the disperse site and the buy down strategy, that could be our 5th year. Does that answer your question, Stephen?
Yes and no. Yes, it definitely helps me understand. So we have approximately through the end of 2022 between projects that are already in the pipeline and not including this Orange Street project, we have that much safe harbor. Is that right? Because we're thinking December would be Six Fairgrounds Road, so that'll get us 24 months from that point.
Yes, the end of 2022 if Six Fairgrounds is awarded then. Got
it. So we'll lose 6 or 7 months of the safe harbor that we have, but essentially we only can, and nothing's guaranteed, but we can more or less guarantee that through the end of 2022, we're in safe harbor based on Six Fairgrounds Road coming online.
Yeah, if we get the award, yes.
Right, and that award needs to come at some point in the next, 10 months? That's sort of the leash we have left, and we think it'll be December. We can't control it. Might even be beneficial for us if it happens to be first quarter next year, but whatever, we have 24 months from that point. Okay, and then what is the total number of shy units? Is it 435? That's the total number, not including Surfside Crossing, not including Orange Street. Is that right?
Yes, at the time of the report, that was the total number, correct.
Okay, and then what is, I see this, we're taking 15 units that had been, I guess, penciled in for Surfside Crossing. That would have been the 60 single family homes, 25%, 25% affordable. So that's why we had 15 penciled in. Those are coming off. What do we think? I'm not up on what the latest proposal is from them. Do we think it'll be 15 or maybe it'll be 20? What's a good number just to keep in our minds of what it might be?
So when the ZBA issued their permit, the comprehensive permit for 60 units last July, we immediately received the credit for those. It's just the way that it works. Okay. But we knew that someone was going to appeal that decision, whether it be the developer or opponents of the project. So that's why we show them coming off. If the building permit isn't pulled within that first year, they come off. The developer appealed the decision to the Housing Appeals Committee, and they are proposing, the developer, the full amount, the 156 units. They've switched their product over to all condominium, but that is what they are seeking permission to build from the Housing Appeals Committee for.
Okay, and is that, again, I don't know the details, so I appreciate the clarity. Is it all ownership condos, or is there a rental component? It's all ownership. So 25% of what, 156? Is that what you said?
Yep.
Okay. So we'll get 39 units theoretically. I mean, I think, anyway, everybody has their opinions. I hope it's not 39 that we get credit for, but maybe it is 39 we get credit for. And then I think the numbers that I've seen that you've said for what you guys are targeting for Orange Street is somewhere between 24 and 32 or 30 or something. So
I mean, yeah. So I'm sorry, local. Yeah, the zoning that exists there for that district permits up to 32 units for a parcel that size. I think that 24 is the magic number as far as a year safe harbor goes, and it would be TBD to determine what number works there in terms of number of units. But while we're talking about Orange Street, just for a second, neighborhood is a central part of Neighborhood First, and if we look at that site, what is in the immediate neighborhood is, generally speaking, large commercial buildings as well as a fairly large residential building. So again, it was part of the calculus in considering that site that it wouldn't be putting something that in effect doesn't exist in that area, but something that might actually complement and work well there.
Okay, I'm not up on the specifics enough of that project to, want to insert my thoughts on it.
Yep.
You guys have done that analysis, but thank you for those numbers.
Stephen, are we going to come to a conclusion on your questions at some point shortly? Because we have some other things we need to do, and Libby will have to step off, and I want to be able to have Libby participate. So how many more questions do you have, just to get an understanding?
I have a couple more questions and then I'll be finished.
Thank you.
All right, so we've got 435 units, 39 maybe coming from Surfside Crossing and 24 from Orange Street. That would put us at 498, I believe. And that's above the current 10% number. And then, but my point in bringing that up or doing that math is that at that point, the appropriation to use the 20 million dries up. And I wonder if it might make sense, given what at least one of the proponents and what some of the voters, who voted for the appropriation thought was the intended use, that more of it go toward, now understanding that math and that we, might be there with projects in the pipeline, that maybe we use more of that money to try out, the original intent, which is to buy single family homes around the island, existing housing stock.
So I was going to.
Brooke has raised her hand a couple of times. So if you don't mind me turning it over to Brooke, and then back to you. Thank you.
So I think it's helpful to understand that the raw math itself doesn't work. It's a matter of timing. And I think Tucker tried to point that out, that the years it's going to take to get to 498 will put us out of safe harbor and end up potentially having more housing built as a result of being out of safe harbor. So I think it's this challenge. To me, I see it as a challenge, and I keep sort of repeating myself, but it's not just a stepwise math problem to get to 490. It's a timing and how units get counted and what is and is not in our control, including the ultimate build out at Richmond, whether or not it even happens. So it is about a combination of making sure we meet that 24 units a year as we move toward the 490. So.
Thank you, Brooke. Tucker?
Just quickly, I was going to say, I mean, the committee, both the Neighborhood First Committee as well as the Affordable Housing Trust, does not look at the strategies, you know, in a mutually exclusive way. I mean, they can be complementary, and I would say that in the Orange Street analysis, there was a view that qualifies also as scattered. It's not in let's call it one of the traditional areas where there has been more of the year-round housing developed on, call it, a little larger scale. So folks can have differences of view. There's no question about it. But we've received a lot of favorable feedback, as Brooke noted, from folks who aren't the usual suspects in the housing world.
Thank you, Tucker. Stephen, any final questions?
No, we can move on. Thanks.
Thank you. Anybody else on FinCom raising your hand for any final questions? Okay, thank you. So thank you to Ken, Brooke, Tucker, Sully. Thank you very much for coming. And as the project develops and their spending develops, we'll probably want to review it again, as you can imagine. So for my comments from the beginning, which was it's a very large appropriation and FinCom loves paying attention to very large appropriations, right? So
Madam
Tucker,
Chair?
yes.
Well, thank you. No, and like we highly value any thoughts that you all have, and to that end, we provided a draft of the RFP in search of those individual sites. We're hoping to go before the select board at their August 5th meeting to give them the opportunity to review it publicly, to publicize it, and then to publish it shortly thereafter. But we would encourage any thoughts or comments that you all would have, please send them our way.
And to set a deadline for that, because I love everything deadline. So Tucker doesn't get it last minute. If anyone on the committee does have a comment you'd like to add to the RFP, let me look at my calendar here. I guess he would probably want it no later than the 3rd of August. Is that fair, Tucker? 2 days is enough? Or no,
Sure,
you need it to be able to put it in the packet. So you need it you would need it by July 31st or the 30th, by July 30th. So if you have any comments on the RFP, get it to Tucker by the 30th, because otherwise it has to go in the select board packet. And
perfect.
Okay, how's that?
Thank you.
Thank you. Well, thanks to all of you
everybody.
for participating.
Thank you.
Enjoy your Monday.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Right.
Thanks, everyone. Okay, so now I'm gonna attempt share screen again. Our next topic on our agenda is the FinCom way of working, which Libby actually, frankly, labeled much better than I did, and I still can't remember what it is, but there we go. And let me see here, desktop share. Okay, can everyone see this document?
Yep.
Can I get a thumbs up? Thank you. Let me see. Do you want me to make it a little bit bigger? Boom. Oops. How's that? Is that good? Okay, great. Yep. I don't see all of you now anymore, so you may have to shout. So the point of this is we talked about in our meeting, and we actually talked about it during David's time, was just to get some more clarity about who does what and who's responsible for what. So I'm sure you've all read it in great depth and have, had great thinking about it. So just one of the first pieces of content I wanted to talk about with all of you is the allocation of time. This is just, my putting a thumb up in the air and saying, I believe that we spend, of our on FinCom, we probably spend about 65% of it on the warrant and 15% on budgets. committee, you can read it. I'm sorry, I'm reading it to you, which is the #1 rule of how not to present. So any changes to that, any comments to that? Because again, this is a draft document, so I will be making any changes that all of you suggest before we finalize, before we and circulate it with our course.
Just a quick, word preference, Denise. I mean, I don't think
Sure.
in terms, I don't think I would use the word ruling. I think, I think we
Motions.
make motions.
Okay,
Just
Thank
ruling
you.
seems a little dictatorial to me.
thank you, Joe. Okay, thank you. I'll make that change.
And I, just as long as I a little bit have the floor, I mean, I was a little curious about, in terms of your time allocation, we certainly do look at the various budgets as part of reviewing articles for town meeting. But I guess I've never felt, and I don't think our responsibility includes really having any particular budget oversight. It's really, we review the annual budget and, make a motion on those particular articles, and the town meeting votes on them. But, it's not like we have a review and, at least I don't think we have a review and sort of approval process on a more sort of day-to-day managerial level. Is that, maybe that's not what
Sure.
you're implying?
No, what I just meant is that we have our, we go through the details of the budgets. We get them submitted to us, we look at them, we have the sessions with all the department heads. So we do review the annual budgets. I guess effectively when we make a motion to approve the budget, we then make an approval to the budget. But review just meant the work that we do. If there's a better way to phrase that, I'm happy to change it.
Got it. Okay.
I mean, Libby or Brian, do you want to weigh in on that?
I don't really have a problem with the way you worded it. Are you talking about where it says working closely with town administration to review the annual budgets?
Yeah.
Yeah. The way I read that was just the annual, not anything more.
Oh yeah,
Yeah,
just the
okay.
annual. I mean, I can put into year but we look at the budget for, by the time we get the materials and look at it and go through it. So, okay.
Okay.
Other comments before we move to a little bit farther down in the document?
Yeah, Denise, it's Chris. Can you actually scroll up to the various committees we work with?
Yeah. Well, this
So-
is, this is the ones that present to us when we're looking at the warrant article.
Well, so notably missing on here is school committee, which
Oh yeah, you're right.
which is
Absolutely.
maybe accurate.
No, you're
because
correct.
we don't really work
Chris.
with the school committee, but I think that's worth noting because that's what 35% of the budget,
Yep.
and we don't
Thanks,
really work
Chris.
with the school committee, and I think that's something worth pondering a little bit.
Okay. Thank you. So, but you're right. It is. I'll put school committee in there. Is that okay, Libby?
I think I mentioned that in my edits back. But yes.
Oh, okay. I didn't get your edits back yet, or I didn't check my email this morning after 9:30. Perfect. Okay, thank you. Yeah, I was trying to think of the groups that come in and present to us, and you're right, Chris. They present, obviously the school committee presents their budget. Okay. And then the one comment here in italics, I look at this document as to, in a normal time, this is how we could work. But with COVID and how hard scheduling is and all that kind of stuff, we really have to take a pragmatic view as to what's achievable in the next, in the next year until things get back to a more normal way of working. So that was the reason for that. Okay. So in terms of the detail, I just broke it up by the 4. Am I making everybody dizzy? I broke it up by the I broke it up by the 5 topics that are there. And so warrants, and Brian and I had a conversation this morning as well about the first item as we all know, when we hold our first hearings, probably nobody comes because they think their topic isn't going to be considered, or they don't want to sit through the whole FinCom meeting. So can we be more specific, saying we are going to review, A through M on this day, and N through, whatever letters we get to on the citizen warrant articles on the next day. So then that way and then encourage people to come and talk to us if they want to, rather than what's happened previously. So that was some of our discussions and thinking, that we could be, kind of breaking it up and trying to get more participation. So, because as you know, we hold a lot of meetings to review these, and it isn't so easy to get everyone in the room that needs to have a say about it. I'll stop talking. Anyone have anything they want to add to the first one?
I personally don't have any trouble making it a requirement that that if you submit a citizens warrant article, that you've gone to the trouble of getting signatures, that it's not requested, you're required to come and discuss your article with the finance committee. And we can certainly, I think your idea, if you want to say, Ms. Jones, your slot is going to be, I don't know, 5:45 on January 15th, and you have 10 minutes at that time. I mean, we could certainly tighten things up and give people specific appointment times. But I don't, I remember this year you did a lot of chasing of people. I don't think that you should, that's part of your job. I don't think that's part of your job description. If people don't show up, it's tough. I mean, we all make time for the meetings, and if the proponent of a particular article, when invited specifically to a specific date and time, can't make it, oh well. So.
Well, I don't just think we can require it, right? I mean, people have certain right. You're saying, I'm not sure I understand what you mean, Joe. Sorry.
Well, I haven't thought this through terribly carefully, but people who they have an issue, they compose an article application, they go out and get their, whatever it is, 25 signatures. That I would think the process could be, they submit it and the town clerk says, thank you, Ms. Jones, we've received your article, and public hearings are on, January 10th and 12th and 14th, and you're invited to discuss your article with the FinCom on, whatever day at whatever time. And it certainly seems to me we could, run the meetings tighter so that, they don't have to sit there for 2 hours. They could show up at 5:30 for their 5:45 appointment. But if they don't show up, I just don't think Denise or the chair of the FinCom should be chasing these people down. If they don't have the interest to show up for the meeting, too bad. It's something that we as the finance committee can take into account. They didn't have the initiative to come and follow up and explain to us why they went to the trouble of submitting it in the first place. So,
well, out of the 53 we had this year, we only had 2 where the sponsors didn't come. And but you're absolutely right, Joe. Some of them required 3, 4, 5 emails to get them to land on a time to come see us. And so I think if we break it into tranches and say, all you people, this is your day, and I think we can probably do a little bit better in terms of appointment times, or do the first come, first serve, which is what we did this year. So you 6 people are coming, and the first one in the room gets to go first. That's your reward for being on time. So we can figure out maybe some logistical way to do that. And I'm just hoping we don't have 53 citizens warrant articles every year. So that would be my first.
Denise,
go ahead, Allie. Sure.
Just as a note, also, we created the citizen warrant article guide for people submitting citizen warrant articles this year. And in that, assuming that they read it, there is the expectation that they do come in and meet with the committee to discuss their article. So I think, to Joe's point, there's probably room to clean that up a bit, or work closer with the town clerk's office to get more informed of when citizen warrant articles are being submitted. And then maybe we can schedule like 2 dates with FinCom, so they kind of have an idea after they submit when they might be meeting with the committee. But but it definitely, I mean, this is the first time we circulated this guide that we came up with, but it shouldn't be news to any of them that they need to be, or we would encourage them to be meeting with the committee to discuss their article.
Thank you, Alice. Libby?
First off, we can't require, Chris is right about that, but they can certainly be invited. And there's always going to be one or two people who have no idea what we're talking about when we say there's a guide online and hopefully you read it. They don't know how to get online. They don't know how to find anything. So we can do our best with that. And I think we even had it printed out so that the town clerk can hand it to people when they submit their warrant article to them for the signatures. So there's a lot of ways that they can get to find out how to do this. It would be a little tricky, I think, to have any kind of a schedule to be handed to them when they drop their warrant article off at the town clerk's office, because we don't know how many are going to be dropped off and we don't know much beyond that. So as soon as we do know, though, maybe Denise, between you and I and Allie or whoever, we can quickly gin up a schedule that can start getting people lined up. And we could also ask when maybe in our citizen article form that they provide a solid email address and telephone number. Sometimes those things are a little hard to find, and we are really starting to try to get them to submit their document in Word so that it doesn't have to be retyped. So there's just some little things like that to clean up too.
Thank you, Libby. Okay, so that kind of covers 1 and 2, ruling on the sponsors' citizen warrant articles. You know, sometimes we need more information than what we have in front of us when the sponsor is speaking to us. But when we can, I think it would be effective if we could actually then do our motion, you know, I'll change all the ruling to make a motion, Joe, throughout the document. I just won't do it right now. And because then that way, often we make the motion, I send them an email telling them what the motion was. They then want to come back and talk to us again. So it's a lot of toing and froing. And so when we can, I am suggesting that we could try to rule on or make a motion. Sorry, that's going to take me a while to change. I'm an old dog and that's a new trick. But to make a motion when the sponsor is in the room. So then that way they can, if they want to immediately appeal it, they can. And we can just put it behind us. So how's everybody? What does everyone think? Is that okay?
I mean, to be honest, that struck me as a nice to have, not a need to have.
No, it's a nice to have. It isn't often going to work. I agree.
Okay.
Sorry, Joe, I cut you off.
No, that was the only point I wanted to make.
Thank you.
I know you already said this, Denise, but you're going to change ruling throughout.
Yeah, to make a motion throughout the whole document. Yep. Just not right now, because otherwise you're just going to all be watching me typing, because I had put ruling almost everywhere. You know, so all the town board commission articles, I think that's worked very well. Libby, thank you very much. You always had the right people in front of us when we needed to. I think it might make sense for us, considering the discussions we had about Article 48, that if we look ahead at the articles in the upcoming year and then say for planning board, while the director of planning attended, the issues kind of arose with planning board itself in terms of trying to understand why FinCom ruled as we did. So I think on some of these issues, it's probably interesting to have the chair of planning board and vice chair or whoever planning board wants to send to our FinCom meeting when we're going to be discussing any articles that that are planning board articles, in addition to Andrew and oh my gosh, I can see her, Leslie. Thank you. So comments from everyone?
I have a question about planning articles. Is it the fact that the planning board makes the motion on planning articles, is that statutory? Is that customary on Nantucket? Has it always been that way, or did it change at some point?
Libby knows the answer.
It's statutory for zoning articles.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other comments about that one? Okay, so the select board, I think what we learned from this one is when I attended the select board meeting, when they had to get through all the articles, 117 in one night, it was a lot, obviously. And then the discussion about why we made the motions that we made was basically the short form because it was already a pretty long meeting. So I'm thinking that as we get tranches of ruling or tranches of motions, we could then jointly meet with select board, and not every single one, because obviously some of them are quite straightforward, but potentially the more controversial ones that select board very conceivably could have a different opinion on, and be able to have a longer discussion with them about it. Because I'm sure they would want to have a longer discussion, as would we, and understanding that scheduling will be tough, but maybe if we could do that a couple of times during the review season, it would at least once during the review season prior to the last minute, this is the night it has to be approved, and, good luck, Denise, defending what you said at FinCom. So, or not defending it, but explaining it. So observations, comments. Either I'm brilliant or you're all tired.
I would say on that, obviously, Denise, you spent a lot of time this past year going to select board meetings. I had mixed feelings. I mean, I think we've had a handful of FinCom select board get-togethers, and in a couple of cases, I don't think we had very good agenda, and so they kind of devolve into just conversation. I think if you really think we need to have a meeting to go through our recommendations, that's fine. It seems to me it's also something where the chair or the vice chair can go to the next the next select board meeting and give them an update on where we stand. So.
Yeah, that's potentially a way, Joe. I just, the night that I attended, I have to say, I was dismayed to have some of the select board members suggest that some of our rulings were stupid. So I realized it was late, everybody was tired, but I thought, well, we put a lot of work into this, and it would be helpful if we could have spent more time together versus you jumping to the conclusion that we had a stupid decision. So that's really my intention of putting everybody together. Now, if there's another way to achieve that, we can also try that too. And again, with COVID, there's, all bets are off in terms of how much we can schedule on this. But thank you for that suggestion, and I'll add it as a consideration. Any other comments? No? The working sessions, Brian, Libby, Allie, Stephen, and I met every other week during the warrant review season, and that really worked well, I thought. So nothing to fix, which is always nice, right? So on budgets, again, it's Capcom. I think for all of our perspective is that we can, I understand Stephen Welsh's point that when we want to understand more about a capital request, we should talk to the department head. And if we had more information ahead of time before the budget reviews, we could then ask the department head during the presentation. So it's just a question of, and Stephen and I had met in January to discuss how we could have a couple of interim touch points that were productive prior to the final report. And so it's really trying to accommodate those. And I reached out to Stephen to start the discussion now, understanding that Capcom is also kind of in a very awkward position with getting started. And Peter McKeegan probably knows this better than I do, with under COVID. So that's the idea of the interim reviews, which covers the first one under budgets and this first one under capital. And as there's no, I think, okay, then moving along. Each department had 20 minutes. Sometimes I don't think we had enough time. We kind of rushed. And so I'd like to leave a bigger gap between presentations so we could run over if we need to, rather than scheduling everybody for half an hour and then finding out we didn't need a half an hour. So I'd like to keep it to 20 minutes, but maybe with a little bit longer gap in between the presentations. Okay, all righty. Committee participation, jumping to that. Hey,
Denise?
Yeah.
Can I interrupt you just briefly? I think one thing, what does strike me on the, I'm trying to find it now in my copy, but on the capital program committee, I mean, it's been a little bit of a battle over the years. Certainly, you know, when David was on the FinCom, he was, you know, I think we always felt like the Capcom took a long time to get its work done, and we were always getting their report sort of late in the process.
Yep.
You know, maybe that's a committee that, I don't know, you know, 6 weeks before, you know, we really need to have their information, we ought to have a get together with them, so they, and sort of force them, even if they haven't written their report, but force them to sit down with the finance committee and discuss, you know, where they are, what are the, you know, what are the more controversial issues or expenditures that they're wrestling with. So at least that we're in, even if we don't have their final report, we sort of know what they're kind of where they are. You know, and certainly Peter McEachern has been, you know, our representative on the CapCon for a couple of years. I assume Peter's planning to continue to do that, but, you know, the other alternative is to have him give us more, you know, committee report sort of updates periodically as well.
Yeah, thanks, Joe. That's one of the things that I had written, is to hold interim reviews with them, understanding that their work is work in progress until the final report, because if we don't get it ahead of time, you know, the final report comes out typically after our budget reviews are held, and so that doesn't really help us. And also, I think it's interesting to see the capital requests in light of the 10-year capital plan. So, you know, when we're looking at a point in time for this year, but we'd want to see it over the, you know, the 10-year program. So Stephen Welsh and I had agreed that in January that we would implement that, and I'm chasing him to see if we still are in agreement, which I would expect we are. We just will have to be adaptable based on COVID. So thank you, Joe. I'm actually going to, because Libby has to step off shortly, I'm going to jump to the ad hoc, because the committee, oh yeah, the one thing I do want to bring up is the committee reports at FinCom meetings. We don't take enough time for them. I think sometimes, you know, if I take a look at, for example, some of the discussions around Neighborhood First and potentially some of the discussions on capital, we probably either need to start the meeting with committee reports so we have enough time to discuss them, or I do a troll round at the beginning and say anything urgent on any of your committee reports, otherwise we'll still leave it at the end. Because you're all investing a lot of time in your committees, and yet we don't always get enough time for committee reports during our meeting. So does that make sense to everyone?
Yes.
Okay.
Sure.
Thank you. And then timing of when FinCom gets pertinent information. And Libby and I have spoken about this, as I have with Brian. So I will have calls with Brian weekly. And if we don't need to spend too much time, we won't spend too much time. And then monthly, we will meet together with Libby and Brian, Stephen and I, to just, because that worked really well during the review season for the warrant. So now we can just do it monthly. And then as and when things arrive from those discussions and we should hold a FinCom meeting, then we'll schedule either an ad hoc meeting or, you know, follow all the open meeting laws for sending out emails or whatever we need to do. And then posting of the packet. So actually, Brian and I chatted about this morning. We got a request from a member of the public that we should have a packet similar to the select board's packet. So then that way the public can follow along with what we're looking at and what we're reading. And Brian and I also chatted about this morning. So that's what, and Allie will be helping, obviously. So we're going to be starting to move to sending out packets. Correct, Brian?
Correct.
Thank you, Brian. So yeah, so that's, now I realize we've kind of raced through this. I also just copied and pasted, as you can see, the stuff that's on the website of the town as to what we're supposed to do. So general reaction, I mean, we have Libby, do you want to make any, I know you have to step off for a meeting with Governor Baker. So do you want to make any comments
Sure.
before you and Charlie
Okay,
get your job done?
that is sort of an exaggeration. It's just much.
Oh, that's okay.
But thank you. I communicated a little bit with Denise about this last week. I think it's really helpful. And I think it sort of sets into place a framework that is is going to be helpful not only to all of us working on this stuff, but for the public when people say, you know, who does what? Do I go to FinCom? Who do I go to? So I really like it. The only concern that I had was a little bit about as we move forward with COVID still, you know, bothering us, that some of this is going to be a little hard to deal with. So we're just going to have to work with that. And I also jotted a note, Denise, that probably sometime kind of soon, before the end of August, you and I and Brian and Allie and perhaps Steve Morey and maybe even Stephen Welch and Don Holgate, I don't know yet, should carve out some time to go over the calendar for 2021 annual town meeting. Because I think we need to have this document handy with us so we can refer to it as we're scheduling things. And just get that sort of in place before September. We haven't even started Capcom yet, for example. And that's been kind of on my list of things to try to deal with. But, you know, I'm sure people know this, but it is really hard to do anything normal right now still. So just bear that in mind. But overall, I really like this. And I thank you, Denise, for putting that. It's a big effort to put this thing together. And I think it's really, really helpful.
Thank you, Libby. Brian?
I second that, Denise.
Oh, thank you, George.
No, I mean, I'll certainly concur with what Libby said. I think that the document is really well done, and I think it is really helpful in moving forward. So I think it's a great idea.
Thank you. I'm actually going to stop sharing now so I can see all of you, because otherwise I can't. There we go. So I just wanted to get quickly, I mean, Libby, I know you have to step off. Stephen, your comments, reaction?
I'm grateful for the time that you've put into doing this. You and I have talked for a few months now about a need for restating, you know, what our goals are and the process we use to achieve them. So thank you for doing it. You sent me a draft a few days ago, and I didn't have much to say. I didn't have much to say today. I think we're sort of in agreement about, you know, what things needed a little bit of improvement, and the things that didn't need improvement, I think it was worth restating and having it all in one place. So thank you for doing that.
No problem. Joe, additional comments?
No, I mean, I think it outlines the process well. I think that you point out the things that operate pretty well. And I think in general, we do operate pretty well as a finance committee. And I think some of the suggestions or tweaks to sort of improve the flow of information and communication are fine. Yeah, I think it was good.
Thank you.
Thank you for taking the time.
Oh, sure. Peter Schaefer?
I think it's a good map. I think maps are important, especially today, especially in government. And God forbid we should have a map in Washington. You know, it's just, I think it goes back to when people talk to me, say, oh, you're on FinCom. You know, why can't the streets be, you know, repaved? You know, generally, I don't think the members of the town and the electorate understand what we don't get elected. It doesn't really matter. Understand what we really do to begin with. I think FinCom has a mysterious veil, and the veil covers, you know, basically can't really get it. And I think everything we do to organize ourselves more will help that.
Thank you. I mean, one of the things I thought is after I share this with all the corresponding partners and get, you know, just have a chat with everybody and get some comments, was to create actually a short PowerPoint presentation from it, and then ask for an agenda slot on the select board to present it. So that way the people who watch select board and wonder what FinCom actually does get to, you know, so it's obviously not urgent to do this, but I thought that would be a good way to have it potentially reach more people with the, you know, and again, all the stuff I would send out to all of you, and you know, it's not going to happen tomorrow. So, but I thought that might be helpful. Chris?
Yeah, good idea.
Yeah, no, I think it's all good, and appreciate the time that went into it. But your comments just now raised something for me. Was the moderator mentioned at the header of the people who are important in our sphere?
No, I didn't have the moderator in that, and I can add Sarah.
Because I think, you know, in making that, your point and Peter's point about clearing up FinCom's role, I think, people don't understand that it's essentially a function of our form of town meeting government. And that's,
Right.
and we are a cog in that system. And that's where the discussion starts. And I think that, therefore, our relationship with the moderator is an important one. That's just.
I'll add that in. Thank you, Chris. Peter McKeechern?
My only comment would be the following. I think, and it's not maybe for FinCom, I would love to see where we can get or change the 25 signature requirement, and I'm just being facetious, more to 250. I also think the percentages of our time, 65-35, in my world, I'd flip that, meaning 65% in capital and operating budget, and 35% of our time should be on warrants. That's just me. I think that is doing much more for the community as a whole instead of putting out forest fires. I think that citizen warrants are great, but I think if you make it much more, not difficult, but you get more information out at the beginning and number of signatures required, you may find that the 65-35 just flips on itself. That's just me.
Yeah. No, actually, Peter, it was after seeing the 53 last year. I was thinking that we should have at least 100, and then I looked into it, and it's a state requirement to have the numbers that we have to have. Is that correct, Libby? And not something that we can change here, because I was going to put in a citizen warrant article to change the number of signatures for a citizen warrant article. And ironic as that was, but because I do think if you believe in your article, then getting 150 signatures shouldn't be hard, or whatever the number, whatever the higher threshold is. So thank you for that. And I share your observation. So Jill?
Oh, nothing. I was just saying, I wish you could do that citizen article to raise the threshold for submitting articles. Well done. Thanks for everything you're doing, Denise. It's good. It's good to see it all on paper and just be reminded of what we're doing. I've got to think maybe next year, if we're getting the same articles, is that how we're going to handle this? We'll just take the articles we made motions on and they'll just be resubmitted for next spring.
Yep. Thank you. George?
I have nothing else to add. I think Peter's suggestion bears some compromising, but it could be a big help to us. The only other thing that came to mind is that in the course of inventing or reinventing how we present our role to the town, that we could endeavor to put together people from various departments and make some sort of a video presentation or a PowerPoint presentation that people, even just students in the school system, could look at and get the feel of, why does this happen? How does it happen? When does it happen? And get on board.
Thank you, George. Allie? Any comments from your side?
Not really. I was just texting Libby and Brian on the side, but I guess the only thing I was thinking is I would welcome the opportunity to have a discussion with the committee on the information that you want to see presented in the department budget presentations, just so we can be giving you the information you need to. There's less back and forth, and the time spent during that meeting can just be maximized and most efficient.
Okay, I'll make a note of that. Thanks, Allie. Okay, one other quick agenda item. Thank you, everyone. Thank you for taking the time. There will be no STM this fall. As I said in my email to all of you, the effort that would have to go in definitely outweighs any potential benefit of having it. So, and if you need to, you can either watch Libby explain it to the select board on the 22nd of July on TV, or Libby can give you the highlights right now before she steps off. But there will be no STM. And I took a look, I sent you our tracking spreadsheet where I then highlighted the ones that are still open. And I would imagine the only ones that potentially might want to get discussed again were the ones we wrote motion not to adopt. However, unless from my perspective, unless something materially changes from the time we first debated it until the time and made our motions, I wouldn't see, I mean, of course, the sponsors can come back and ask us to reopen it. But I wouldn't see why we would initiate reopening any of the ones. But again, it won't happen. We'll make that determination in the spring as it gets closer to the ATM. So that was my comment about that. If anyone has Libby, you want to add anything?
I got slightly distracted with my friend, the governor, because he started talking. What was that? Want me to elaborate on?
I'm sorry. Now my dogs are barking at the top of their lungs. I said the STM is canceled, and with a lot of good reasons.
Yeah, and I think you said what they were. There's too many factors that make it really difficult to have one, for one thing. But for another thing, there really isn't anything that's incredibly urgent that we can't operate without. There were a couple of things that we were talking about, potentially something to do with our island home. Should we take advantage of the successful ballot question and try to have the associated warrant article? And there was an initial thought that potentially we would need a special in the fall for borrowing for the airport to deal with their PFAS issues. But we in fact don't need that in the fall. We can do that at the annual. And I think the issue with the island home is that's complicated. It's going to take, a little more work on our part to do public outreach about it. And I think there are enough people out there who might want to discuss it, but maybe feel uncomfortable coming to a town meeting, that it wouldn't be transparent enough, I don't think, to have it in the fall.
Thank you. No hands are raised. So our last agenda item is committee reports. And does anyone have anything from one of their committees that they want to share with the Finance Committee? And no hands are raised. The second to last, the penultimate agenda item is date of next meeting. We do not have a next meeting scheduled at this time. And, as and when we need to have one, I will send you out an email urgently. And I also, often when we need to do something on very short notice, I also then just send you a text. I, however, have not been clever enough to figure out how to have a group text. I have to type in all your names. And so I wanted to just have a group send, so I could always have FinCom on my phone and send it to all of you. But when there's something urgent, I will text you to go look at your email, basically. And then that way, So it's helpful if you check your emails, obviously, when you can. And when it's urgent, I will text all of you. And what else? I don't have anything else. Anything else from anyone? Otherwise, I'll look for a motion to adjourn. Thank you all very much. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion to second.
Thank you. And by roll call, Stephen? Stephen, is he frozen? Oh, or is he just sleeping?
Muting or unmuting myself, but yeah.
Yeah, I know. Good. Thank you, Stephen. Joe?
Aye.
Peter S?
Yes.
Chris?
Yes.
Peter McEachern?
Yes.
How do you like I say your name differently every time, Peter? I'm one of these days I'm going to get it right.
I do it
Jill?
every day also, don't worry.
Jill?
Yes.
George?
Yes.
And as always, thank you, Ali and Brian and Libby and our friends at NCTV. Thank you very much. And the meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. Have a good week.
Everyone.
Thanks.